Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and this is the Hoka Cielo X1, Hoka's latest super shoe. Now, we've had this super shoe in this black prototype colorway over the past month, and I've been able to do some of my London Marathon training in it. I've done some track sessions with it as well too, and I have, of course, raced in this shoe as well too. So what we'll do first is take you through all those key details that you need to know about the Cielo X1, including that all-important price. We'll get into some run and race test thoughts then, and then we will tell you whether the Hoka Cielo X1 is a super shoe that is super and worth getting excited about. Okay, so here's what you need to know about the Hoka Cielo X1, and let's start with that all-important price. So in the UK it costs £250, and then in the US it costs $270. So that is more expensive than the Hoka Rocket X2, and this essentially sits above the Rocket X2 now in Hoka's kind of super shoe racing kind of focused collection. That does mean it is cheaper than the Alphafly 3, but it is not as cheap as something like the Nike Vaporfly 3. So it is a super shoe, and with a super shoe it does come a big price tag, so this is not a cheap shoe to pick up. So next up, weight, drop and stack height. So we'll start with that drop, and it is 7mm on the Cielo X1, and you have a stack height of 40mm at the heel and 33mm at the forefoot. So that gives you something very similar in stature to the Nike Alphafly 3. Now in terms of that weight, our UK size 8 weighed at 242 grams. So it does make it heavier than something like the Alphafly 3 and also the Hoka Rocket X2. So into the upper, and unlike things like the Hoka Cielo Road and the Rocket X2, Hoka's opted for a knit upper as opposed to a mesh one. Now that is matched up with some pretty skinny flat laces, which are designed to keep down the overall weight of the shoe. You are getting a stretchy tongue below that, and you're also getting some padding inside of the heel collar to prevent rubbing. So into that midsole, and it is a dual density makeup on the Cielo X1, a bit like we got on the Rocket X2. So on the top, you're getting this softer layer of PEBA to give you that comfort. Then below that, you have a winged nylon plate to give you that kind of more aggressive, propulsive feel in this shoe. And then below that is another layer, but a firmer layer of PEBA, which is there to kind of help generate power in this shoe when you're running quicker in it. And then we get into the rubber outsole, which I would say the design is reminiscent of something that we got on the Asics Metaspeed Sky series. So a lot more coverage at the top of the shoe, the forefoot of the shoe, a little bit less at the heel. There are some exposed areas of the foam here, and you are getting this kind of cutout from the midsole into the outsole as well too, and that's to help reduce the overall weight of the shoe as well too. So into fit, and I've had my Hoka Cielo X1 in a UK size 8. That's typically the size that I go for in Hoka shoes, and I think outside of maybe the original Rocket X, going a UK size 8 has been absolutely fine. The Rocket X, it was probably a little bit too snug for me, but I kind of made that shoe work for me. Now in terms of the Cielo X1, it definitely does feel a narrow shoe, which is kind of what you expect to find on a racing shoe anyway, particularly from kind of the midfoot down to the back towards the heel, but it does open up in the toes, and I do think there's a good amount of space up front in the toes as well. No uncomfortable rubbing there, so you know, I feel for me UK size 8 worked well for me. But I will say the nature of this up, and it's very kind of stiff and rigid, it does make getting into this shoe pretty challenging to do. So it isn't one that you can just easily slip on. I think that's probably a similar story with the Rocket XT, but yeah, that's something worth noting here, is that, you know, when I race in it or when I've gone and kind of rushed to go out in this shoe, I really struggled to really get my feet into this shoe. Once it's in, it feels nicely locked in. As I said, the space up front of the toes is very good. You do get some padding. It's maybe not the most prominent padding, but it is padding inside here at the sides here to make sure that you're getting some kind of protection and comfort there, and kind of good hold there. Like, I haven't found any kind of rubbing from my experience in this shoe, running kind of long runs, kind of racing in it as well too. Now these laces, obviously these aren't, this is a shoe that is designed to be light, so they've obviously tried to shave some weight by having these kind of thinner laces. I don't absolutely love these laces, and I do think you need to work a little bit harder to kind of pull these in and get a good lockdown on this tongue, which this tongue is kind of soft and kind of stretchy and kind of works in terms of making sure it sits put. But other than that, as I said, it is a narrow fitting shoe from the kind of heel to the midfoot, but it does open up in the toes, and it was good enough for me. So yeah, going true to size for me has been fine. But I would say it is a narrow fitting shoe elsewhere, which is something to be wary of if you've got kind of wider feet and you're worrying it might kind of open up and maybe not open up enough for you in the midfoot and at the heel. Okay, so to that run test, and I will also include my race test thoughts at the end of this section. Now, I have just ticked over 50k in this shoe, and that's been made up of runs like I think initially did a kind of 10k kind of treadmill run with it, just to kind of get a feel of what the shoe was going to offer. I've done a track session in it, which was kind of 1k reps, 200 meter recoveries, and then a kind of 2k at the end of that session. I've also done a long marathon training run in this as well, so that's kind of 14 miles at my kind of nearest kind of marathon pace, so probably going 7:30, 7:40 minute mile pace. And then I did the 10k race, which was at my 10k pace, so 6:30 minute mile pace as well too. Now, what I'll say is first and foremost is that when you put the shoe on and you kind of struggle to put the shoe on, it introduces you to that kind of unstable feeling that you're going to get in this shoe, and yeah, once you start running in it and you get up at those faster paces, then it's something that you forget about. But what I definitely would say is that there's definitely something Alphafly-esque about the shoe. Now, I haven't run in the Alphafly 2 or the 3. I have run it in the original and run a lot more in it the past, well, end of last year. And this is a shoe that definitely has hallmarks of that shoe. It really has, that gives you that kind of tippy toe kind of feeling on your toes. You've got that kind of, which I think really works well from a Hoka point of view, that kind of meta rocker, which really kind of gets you up onto your toes quickly through those transitions. And it's exactly what you get here on the Cielo X1. It is bouncy. There's plenty of bounce here. It's something that I maybe felt a little bit in my knees in some sessions, but ultimately I never came away feeling like my legs were absolutely wrecked. And I think on that long marathon training run, that was where I was most concerned. And in places where I maybe dropped the pace a little bit as well too. But when you are running at your quickest, that's where this shoe really comes to life, and it feels fantastic to run quick in it as well too. I think, yeah, for me, you know, the comfort side of things has been absolutely fine. So while this upper is very difficult to get into, I think in terms of the space and the feeling of running in the shoe, it's been absolutely fine. I said I've had no kind of rubbing, no issues with the upper and the fit of this shoe. That midsole, just, you know, it's similar to the makeup of the Rocket X2. It's that dual density one, that kind of softer kind of section on the top, that kind of harder bit under this kind of winged carbon plate as well too. And you know, you do feel those things in combination, but it feels great when you are running. You kind of forget about it when you are running at your quickest in this shoe. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I say I've got my race test to talk about as well too, is the outsole. Now, as I said, I've done 50k in this shoe. Now, there is a fair amount of rubber in this shoe, and as we mentioned, the weight of this shoe compared to something like the Alphafly 3, it is heavier. It's not the super lightest super shoe that's out there, but from a gripping point of view, it's been absolutely fine for me. I'm not seeing any terrible signs of wear yet, though I will say, and you get quite a big gap here in the outsole where the cutouts are. I have found that I got a little bit of a rock stuck in here on one of my runs, so it's not immune to any issues. I mean, it hasn't caused any problems, but from a gripping traction point of view, it's felt pretty good. I feel like there's enough rubber here to race in it, race long in it, but also maybe handle some kind of longer training runs as well too. And so I have no real complaints about the outsole. There's a lot of rubber here, as I said, and I'm not seeing any terrible signs of wear yet after 50 kilometers of running. So I feel positive about the durability of this shoe. So yeah, that's some overall kind of general running thoughts about the Hoka Cielo X1. Next, I'm going to get into my race test, and then I'll get into my verdict on whether you should buy the Hoka Cielo X1. Okay, so first race done in the Hoka Cielo X1. So I've just completed the run through Lee Valley Velo Park 10k race. So that is 6 laps of the Velo Park, a little kind of 1 mile loop, and it's, you know, some little ups, little downs, as we kind of spoke about in our on Cloud Boom Echo 3 race test that myself and Nick did recently. So I've just been away in Barcelona for a few days in some nicer, warmer conditions with Nick and Kieran. So back to normality in terms of conditions, but actually perfect kind of racing conditions overall. In terms of the shoe now, I've obviously done a fair bit of running already in the Cielo X1. It's the first time I raced in it, so I was racing, I think I did 41.12 in the end, so kind of 6-minute, 30-minute mile pace for me, which is pretty much my 10k pace at the moment. And in terms of the experience of running the Cielo X1, I think the first thing for me, the thing that hasn't really gone away, is that it is a tough shoe to get on very quickly, and that's really down to the kind of the structure of the upper. It's a very stiff kind of upper, particularly around the kind of heel collar part. It's, it takes a while, so if you're running late and you need to kind of jump into the shoe, it's not done very easily. But once you're in, you're locked in, it feels comfortable. The laces, I mean, I'm not a massive fan of the laces. They're kind of obviously there to kind of design-wise to reduce the weight, because obviously there's extra weight elsewhere in the shoe. So getting a good lockdown does take a little bit of work, but generally when it's there, the shoe's been absolutely fine from a fit point of view, and was in that race. In terms of the experience, I mean, that bounce is there, and the bounce is there throughout that run. And I mean, I think what I found in all of my runs, and even kind of running at my kind of 10k marathon pace, is that I felt it in my knees, and it's not been a bad way, but you definitely feel that bounce kind of riding up the entirety of your leg. But actually, in terms of the feeling, it's really good. It's that tippy toe feeling that you get on things like the Alphafly, which I think it's a really nice feeling. Now, I felt pretty good. I didn't have any issues in terms of that run, in terms of the shoe. I've enjoyed pretty much every run in it, and that kind of a race pace, 10k race pace, it felt good. I still feel like maybe it's going to be best suited on those longer distances, but there's nothing to say that it doesn't work for those shorter distances as well too, and I didn't feel like there's any complications for me. Outsole wise, absolutely fine. I mean, it's pretty dry at the moment. You're on the Velo Park course is all relatively kind of, flat in terms of what you're getting there. So it's really kind of the hills and stuff. But the hilly parts were, absolutely fine. I didn't feel like I had any issues in terms of the performance of the shoe and how it felt in the shoe. So yeah, pretty good overall in terms of racing in the Hoka Cielo X1. I do think it may be a shoe better suited to longer distances, but it absolutely has the capability to be a shoe to run a bit like the Alphafly, I think, to run at a variety of distances, and it feels good. It's bouncy, the ride is great, what you'd want and what you'd like to feel from a race shoe. And ultimately it felt comfortable. I didn't feel like I had any issues. As I said, I do feel like you feel it in the knees because of that bounce, but I didn't feel like it was overly aggressive. I think there's enough in the ride there to give that enjoyment, to give that kind of propulsive feel, but also make sure that, as I said, you can tell about the stability of it in terms of when you're walking around with it. Once you start racing, it feels absolutely fine. You're running at those quicker paces. So all good then on my first race test with the Hoka Cielo X. I'm definitely looking forward to racing a little bit more in it, hopefully later this year. But yeah, a good first impression from a race point of view. That's what it's designed for. And yeah, it passed the test for me on that one. Okay, so my verdict on the Hoka Cielo X1 is that this is a seriously good running shoe, a seriously good racing shoe, and one that I have enjoyed running in over the past month. I think it fits all the criteria in terms of what you want from a super shoe. It's thin, it's got that kind of nice bouncy ride, it really gets you quickly up onto your toes, and I do think there's an outsole there that is going to give you that kind of durability over longer distances as well too. Now, obviously, Hoka does have a pretty good racing shoe in its collection already. What I would say is the Rocket X2 is fantastic as well. I feel like maybe what Hoka is doing is almost creating their own kind of Vaporfly, Alphafly kind of duo here, where the Cielo X1 definitely gives that kind of Alphafly feel instead of that protection. I think better, design over longer distances, whereas the Rocket X2 maybe feels a better shoe for kind of shorter distances up to that kind of half marathon distance, where you're getting a slightly different feel, more close to the ground feel, but a more responsive feel overall. But that is a fantastic running shoe, racing shoe. This is just a racing shoe that's very different. As I said, it's the closest thing that I've kind of experienced that kind of reminds me of the Alphafly. Now, I've only run in the original Alphafly. I haven't run in the Alphafly 3, so I'll leave those kind of comparisons to Nick. But as I've said, I do think when you look at the price, the experience, and what this is kind of offering, and how it's similar to that kind of Alphafly experience, it could be one where if you're struggling to get the Alphafly 3, this could be a nice alternative. Now, I can't, as I say, comment on the weight difference, as there is a weight difference in the two shoes, but ultimately in terms of that experience, in terms of that ride, in terms of that tippy toe feeling, I think you're getting something similar here from the Cielo X1 that I think is at the essence of the Alphafly shoe as well too. So yeah, for me, a very good shoe. I think, you know, it's at that super shoe price. I think it is, you know, up there with the best of the shoes that I've tested personally, in terms of a shoe that I think, you know, I've tested other shoes recently, things like the New Balance SC Elite V4, and it kind of puts things into perspective when you have a shoe like this, where this is really kind of matching, I think we're getting close to what we'd probably consider is the best kind of marathon racer in the Alphafly 3, but this is a very good racing shoe, a very good running shoe from Hoka, and it's a shoe that I'm going to enjoy continuing to run in and hoping to race in. I'd like to kind of get out and do maybe a longer half marathon race in this. I'll probably be using a different shoe for the London Marathon, but this is a shoe, as I said, it's been very enjoyable to run in over the past month, and I think what Hoka has here is a very good shoe on its hands, a very good super shoe, and one that, as I said, I feel like is creating a kind of Vaporfly, Alphafly kind of duo with the Rocket X2 and the Cielo X1. Okay, so there you have it. That is our full review of the Hoka Cielo X1. Definitely a super shoe to get excited about in 2024. Now, some of the other run testers team will be getting hold of this shoe in the official launch colorway, so we'll have more videos on the way in the coming weeks and months. We do have a comparison video up right now, which you can see this compared to the Rocket X2, and we'll put a link in this video to get you to that video next. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos, and yeah, we'll see you for the next run testers video.